I remember the exact sound. A suitcase zipper closing. It cut through the quiet bedroom like a blade, and I knew something was wrong. Isabella Quinn stood near the doorway, one hand resting on her swollen stomach, watching her husband Damien Blackwood move around their luxurious penthouse bedroom with the cold efficiency of a man leaving for something important. He didn't look at her, not once. The man who used to kiss her goodbye every morning now folded suits into a leather suitcase as if she were invisible. A pause hung in the room. "I'll only be gone a few weeks," Damien said finally, his voice flat, already halfway in another world filled with investors, champagne dinners, and European skylines. Isabella nodded slowly, but something inside her twisted. Because weeks ago, he had said the same thing about shorter trips, and those trips kept getting longer. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the table. Then Damien reached into his wallet. For a second, she thought he was pulling out his credit card. Instead, he dropped a single bill on the table. $20. The thin paper slid across the polished wood. "Use this. Use this for whatever you need," he said casually. "I'll send more later." The room went silent. I stared at the bill like it was a joke. But Damien had already turned away. And that's when I realized he wasn't joking. The billionaire CEO picked up his suitcase, walked past his 8-month pregnant wife without touching her, and headed for the door. The front door opened, then closed. The apartment fell quiet. On the table, the $20 bill didn't move. And for a long moment, neither did Isabella. Then she whispered softly, "Did he really just leave me with this?" Isabella finally reached forward. Her fingers trembled. She picked up the bill and slowly sat down. The camera of life froze on a simple image. A pregnant woman, a $20 bill, and an empty doorway. 3 hours later, the silence still hadn't left the apartment. Isabella sat at the kitchen counter staring at the same bill. $20. It felt heavier than it should. In the past, Damien used to leave handwritten notes beside her morning coffee. Now he left pocket change. Her phone buzzed suddenly. Hope flared. Maybe he realized what he did. Maybe he would apologize. Her heart raced as she opened the message. But the sender wasn't Damien. It was Clara Whitmore. Isabella's stomach tightened. Clara was Damien's new business associate, the elegant strategist who had appeared in his life just as his company exploded into a billion-dollar empire. The message was short. "Damien's schedule in Europe will be extremely busy. Try not to bother him." Isabella blinked slowly. I didn't even text him. Confusion turned into something colder. Why would Clara send this? And how did she know Damien had left money behind? Isabella suddenly realized something unsettling. Clara had been standing beside Damien earlier that morning when they discussed the trip. She remembered the way Clara's eyes had briefly glanced at her stomach. Not sympathy, calculation. A chill crept up Isabella's spine. Maybe this wasn't just Damien changing. Maybe someone was pushing him. The phone screen dimmed, and for the first time, Isabella felt the faintest crack in the marriage she had fought so hard to protect. She turned the $20 bill between her fingers, then whispered quietly, "This isn't just about money." Outside the penthouse windows, the city lights flickered on, and somewhere across the ocean, Damien's plane cut through the night sky. Morning came slower than usual. Isabella woke to an unfamiliar feeling. Hunger. She opened the refrigerator. Empty shelves stared back. A single bottle of water, half a lemon. Nothing else. She stood there for a moment, one hand on her stomach as the baby shifted gently. "I know," she whispered softly. "I know." The baby kicked again. A reminder. Life was depending on her. Isabella closed the fridge and walked back to the kitchen table where the $20 bill still waited. That bill had suddenly become their entire safety net. She grabbed a small purse and headed outside. The elevator ride down felt longer than ever. In the lobby, the doorman smiled politely. "Mr. Blackwood traveling again?" Isabella forced a smile. "Yes." The word felt heavy. Outside, the city was loud and busy, but Isabella walked slowly toward the nearest grocery store, careful with each step. She wasn't supposed to be walking this much at 8 months, but there was no choice. Inside the store, she counted every item: bread, milk, eggs. Her fingers hovered over a pack of fruit. Too expensive. She quietly placed it back. At the register, the cashier scanned the items. The total flashed on the screen, $19.35. Close. Too close. Isabella handed over the 20. The cashier returned 65 cents. Coins clinked in her palm. For a moment, the sound echoed louder than it should. A billionaire's wife, holding coins. As she stepped outside, she felt someone watching her. Across the street, a sleek black car idled near the curb. Inside sat a familiar figure, Clara Whitmore. Their eyes met briefly. Clara smiled. But it wasn't friendly. It looked like confirmation. Then the car drove away. Isabella stood frozen on the sidewalk. Something about that smile felt deliberate, and suddenly the $20 felt less like neglect and more like a test. The first bill arrived 2 days later. Electricity. Isabella stared at the number printed on the paper. $480. Her chest tightened. She opened Damien's banking app on her phone, the one he had once shared freely with her. Access denied. She blinked. Maybe it was a glitch. She tried again. Same message. Access removed. A slow wave of realization spread through her body. Damien had locked her out. Her breathing became shallow. I didn't even spend anything. The baby shifted again inside her. But this time the movement felt heavier, almost like pressure. Isabella leaned against the counter. Then another notification arrived. A new message. From Damien. Her heart jumped. Finally. She opened it quickly. But the message wasn't personal. Just one short line. Busy schedule. Talk later. That was it. No question. No concern. No mention of the baby. She typed a response. Damien, the electricity bill. Then paused. Her fingers hovered above the screen. Something inside her stopped. If he wanted to help, he would ask. Slowly, Isabella deleted the message. She placed the phone down. Across the apartment, the lights flickered briefly. A warning. For the first time since Damien left, Isabella felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Fear, but deeper than fear. Doubt. She walked back to the table and stared at the 65 cents in coins. The tiny metal pieces gleamed under the kitchen light. And suddenly the penthouse didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a cage. By the fourth day, the silence had grown louder. Isabella tried calling Damien. Once, twice, straight to voicemail. Each unanswered call felt like a door closing. Finally, she sent a simple message. Can you call me? Hours passed. Then the phone buzzed. Relief surged through her chest. But the response wasn't from Damien. It was Clara again. Damien is in a very important investor meeting in Paris. Please respect his time. Isabella stared at the screen. Something snapped. Stop speaking for my husband, she typed. The reply came instantly. Someone has to. The words landed hard. Isabella's stomach tightened. Not from anger, from suspicion. Why was Clara controlling Damien's communication? And more importantly, why was Damien allowing it? Another message arrived, this time with a photo attached. Isabella opened it slowly. Her breath caught. The picture showed Damien at a glamorous dinner in Paris. Champagne glasses, investors laughing, and beside him, Clara, her hand resting lightly on Damien's shoulder. Too close. The caption below read, Successful evening. Isabella stared at the image. The room suddenly felt smaller. Then the baby kicked sharply. She placed her hand over her stomach. I see it now, she whispered. The image burned in her mind. Not just betrayal, replacement. The pain started quietly. At first, Isabella thought it was just another pregnancy ache. But by midnight, the discomfort had turned into something sharper. She tried to sleep. Couldn't. Her breathing became uneven. Another wave hit. Stronger. She sat up slowly in bed, gripping the sheets. Not yet, she whispered. The baby wasn't due for another month. Her phone lay on the nightstand. She reached for it, then hesitated. Who would she even call? Damien? Clara would probably answer. She slowly stood and walked toward the kitchen for water. Halfway there, dizziness struck. The room tilted. She grabbed the counter. I can't fall. Her vision blurred. The baby shifted again, harder this time. Another pain cut through her abdomen. Isabella gasped. For a terrifying moment, she realized something. She didn't have money for a hospital. Not anymore. The apartment lights buzzed faintly overhead. Outside, the city continued moving like nothing was wrong. But inside the penthouse, a pregnant woman leaned against the counter, fighting waves of pain alone, and the phone on the table stayed silent. Morning arrived with exhaustion. Isabella barely slept. The pain had eased slightly, but a heavy pressure remained in her stomach. She knew she needed to see a doctor, but doctors required money. Still, she grabbed her coat. "I'll figure it out," she murmured. The walk to the clinic was slow. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she finally reached the reception desk, the nurse greeted her kindly. "Insurance card?" Isabella froze. Her hand searched her purse. "Nothing," she explained quietly. The nurse's smile faded. "I'm sorry. Without payment, we can't schedule an emergency check." The words hit like a wall. Isabella nodded slowly. "I understand." She turned to leave. But halfway to the door, her vision darkened. The room spun. Voices blurred. Someone shouted something. Then, everything went black. When her body collapsed to the clinic floor, and in the final second before darkness swallowed her, Isabella had one terrifying thought. What if my baby doesn't survive this? When Isabella opened her eyes again, the world smelled like antiseptic. White ceiling, bright lights, hospital. She blinked slowly. A calm voice spoke nearby. "You fainted outside the clinic." Isabella turned her head. A middle-aged doctor stood beside her bed. Dr. Samuel Grant. His expression was serious but gentle. "You're severely dehydrated and under stress," he said. Isabella sat up quickly. "Doctor, I can't afford treatment." The words felt humiliating, but Dr. Grant didn't react the way she expected. Instead, he studied her chart silently, then glanced at her stomach. "How far along?" 8 months. He nodded slowly, then did something unexpected. He closed the file. "Don't worry about the bill right now." Isabella blinked in disbelief. "Why?" Dr. Grant paused, then spoke quietly. "Juanela, because sometimes helping someone is more important than paperwork." For the first time in days, Isabella felt something unfamiliar. Relief. But Dr. Grant wasn't finished. His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied her condition again. "There's another issue." Isabella's heart jumped. "What issue?" He looked directly at her. "You're showing early signs of premature labor." The room went silent, and Isabella realized things were about to get worse. Across the ocean, Damien Blackwood stood on a balcony overlooking the Paris skyline. The city glittered beneath him. Champagne music echoed from the ballroom behind. Clara stepped beside him. "Investors loved you tonight," she said smoothly. Damien smiled faintly. "Good." But something felt off. He pulled out his phone. 3 missed calls from Isabella. He frowned slightly. "She worries too much," Clara said lightly, noticing the screen. Damien hesitated, then slowly placed the phone back in his pocket. "You're right." The moment passed, but far away inside a hospital room, Isabella Quinn lay awake staring at the ceiling. Dr. Grant's warning echoed in her mind. Premature labor. She placed a trembling hand over her stomach. "I won't lose you," she whispered. But as the night deepened, another contraction tightened painfully across her body, and for the first time, fear replaced hope. The screen fades on 2 distant worlds, a billionaire enjoying Paris lights, and the woman he left behind, fighting to survive. Pain woke her before dawn. Sharp. Sudden. Isabella gasped quietly, gripping the thin hospital blanket as another contraction tightened across her abdomen. Too soon. Dr. Samuel Grant had warned her hours earlier that her body was under dangerous stress, but Isabella hoped the warning was only precaution. Now the pain said otherwise. She swung her legs carefully over the side of the hospital bed and tried to breathe through it. Inhale, exhale. But the contractions stretched longer than expected. Her fingers curled into the mattress. "Not yet," she whispered to herself. The baby shifted again, stronger this time, pressing against her ribs as if responding to her fear. A nurse walked past the doorway and paused. "Are you feeling contractions again?" she asked. Isabella hesitated before answering. "No, yes." The nurse stepped inside quickly and placed a gentle hand on Isabella's shoulder. "We'll call Dr. Grant." Within minutes, the doctor returned, his calm face shadowed with concern. He checked her vitals, studied the monitor, then leaned back slightly. It's not active labor yet, he said carefully. Isabella exhaled in relief, but his expression didn't change. There's something else, he added. Her chest tightened. What? Dr. Grant spoke slowly. Stress is pushing your body toward early delivery. If it continues, we may have to intervene. Silence filled the room. Isabella stared at the floor. A thought pressed into her mind. I shouldn't even be here. She couldn't afford this hospital. She couldn't afford anything. The doctor watched her carefully. You need support, he said. Isabella nodded faintly. But deep down she knew the truth. The one person who should be here was drinking champagne in Europe. Outside the window, the sunrise crept across the city skyline, and Isabella realized something quietly devastating. She might have to face everything alone. 2 hours later, Isabella stepped out of the clinic. Dr. Grant had stabilized her condition and insisted she rest. But rest wasn't possible. Bills didn't wait. The morning air felt colder than usual as she walked slowly down the sidewalk, holding the small envelope containing her medical paperwork. Each step reminded her of the pressure inside her body, still manageable, but dangerous. Her phone vibrated in her purse. For a moment she hoped again. Damien. Maybe he finally called. But the screen showed a different name, Noah Quinn, her older brother. Isabella froze. She hadn't spoken to Noah in months, not since Damien's growing arrogance had quietly pushed her away from most of her family. Noah believed Damien was changing. Isabella always defended him. Now she answered slowly. Hey, Noah's voice said on the line. I've been trying to reach you. Her throat tightened. I've been busy. A pause. Then Noah asked the question she wasn't ready for. Why did a hospital call me this morning? Her heart stopped. She glanced down at the paperwork in her hand. Dr. Grant must have listed him as an emergency contact. Noah, it's nothing, she said quickly. But Noah didn't believe it. Isabella, he said firmly, tell me the truth. The words broke something inside her. Silence stretched between them. Then finally she whispered, Damien left. Another pause. Longer. Then Noah's voice turned dangerously calm. How long? 5 days. And he left you alone? Yes. Her brother inhaled slowly. Isabella could almost hear the anger building. Then he asked the question that shattered the illusion completely. Oh, and how much money did he leave you with? Her eyes closed. She didn't want to say it, but the truth slipped out anyway. $20. For a moment, Noah didn't speak. When he finally did, his voice carried a storm. I'm coming. Noah Quinn arrived faster than Isabella expected. Less than an hour later, a dark pickup truck screeched to a stop outside the apartment building. Isabella watched from the lobby as her older brother stepped out. He looked exactly the same as she remembered. Broad shoulders, protective eyes. But the moment he saw her stomach and pale face, his expression hardened. Isabella, he said quietly. She walked toward him slowly. I'm okay. Noah stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. No, you're not. They rode the elevator upstairs in silence. When the doors opened to the penthouse, Noah stepped inside and stopped. The empty refrigerator door hung open. Bills sat stacked on the counter, and the apartment that once symbolized luxury now felt hollow. Noah turned toward her slowly. Where's Damien's money? Isabella didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the kitchen drawer and pulled out the small coins she had left. 65 cents. She placed them on the table. Noah stared at them. Then his jaw tightened. You're telling me, he said quietly, a billionaire left his pregnant wife with $20. Isabella nodded. The room fell silent. Then Noah slammed his fist against the counter. The sound echoed through the penthouse. That man lost his mind. Isabella stepped forward quickly. Please don't do anything. But Noah was already pacing the room. I warned you about him, he muttered. She lowered her voice. I know. That admission surprised him. He stopped walking. You still defending him? Noah asked. Isabella shook her head slowly. No. The word felt heavier than anything she'd said in years. For the first time, Noah saw something new in his sister's eyes. Not love, not loyalty, something else. Realization. That evening, Noah cooked dinner. It was simple, eggs and toast. but the smell filled the apartment with warmth it hadn't felt in days. Isabella sat quietly at the kitchen table, watching. For years, Damien had insisted on private chefs and luxury meals. Now the sound of a frying pan felt strangely comforting. Noah placed the plate in front of her. "Eat," she smiled faintly. "Yes, sir." He sat across from her, studying her carefully. "You're coming home with me," he said. Isabella shook her head immediately. "No." Noah frowned. "Why?" Her fingers traced the edge of the plate. "This is still my home." A small silence followed. Then Noah leaned forward. "Isabella, he abandoned you." The words were blunt, but true. Still, she looked toward the window where the city lights were beginning to glow again. "Yadadam, I need to see this through," she said quietly. Noah didn't understand. "Through what?" Her voice softened. "Through the truth." That answer confused him, but before he could respond, Isabella suddenly stiffened. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. Another contraction, stronger than before. Noah saw the pain instantly. "Isabella?" She forced a breath. "It's fine." But the lie didn't hold. The contraction deepened, tightening across her body until she leaned forward in her chair. Noah stood immediately. "That's not fine." Isabella closed her eyes. Because deep down, she knew something terrifying. The baby was coming sooner than expected. Night fell quickly. The contractions returned every 30 minutes. Then 20. Isabella tried to remain calm, but Noah watched the clock with growing concern. "This isn't normal," he said. She nodded weakly. "I know." Another contraction hit, stronger. This time, Isabella cried out softly. That was enough for Noah. "We're going back to the hospital." He helped her into the truck carefully. The drive felt endless. Streetlights blurred past the windows while Isabella fought waves of pain in silence. Halfway there, her phone buzzed again. She glanced down. "Damien." Her heart jumped. After days of silence, she answered quickly. "Damien." His voice came through faintly over the line. "Isabella, I saw your missed calls. What's going on?" For a moment, she couldn't speak. Another contraction surged. Noah gripped the steering wheel harder. Finally, Isabella whispered, "I think the baby is coming." Silence filled the line. Then Damien said something unexpected. "That's, inconvenient timing." The words struck like ice. Isabella blinked slowly. "Inconvenient?" "Yes," Damien continued distractedly. "I'm about to attend another investor dinner." Noah heard every word through the phone speaker. His knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. But Isabella didn't argue. Instead, she whispered softly, "Don't worry about it." Then she ended the call. The truck sped toward the hospital, and inside the moving vehicle, Isabella realized something final. Her husband had chosen his empire over his family. Dr. Grant was waiting when they arrived. The moment Isabella stepped into the hospital lobby, nurses rushed her toward a room. Monitors beeped. Lights flashed. The doctor studied her chart quickly. Then his expression turned serious. "You're in early labor," he said. Noah froze. "Is the baby safe?" Dr. Grant hesitated. "We'll do everything we can." Isabella lay back on the bed, breathing through the pain. Machines monitored every heartbeat, every contraction. Another wave hit. She gripped the rail tightly. "I'm scared," she whispered. Noah stood beside her. "I'm right here." But inside his mind, rage burned, because one person should be standing there instead, and he wasn't. Dr. Grant returned after checking the monitor again. "Prepare for surgery," he told the nurses quietly. Isabella heard the words. Surgery. Her heart pounded. "Doctor? Is it that serious?" He met her eyes honestly. "Yes." The room suddenly moved faster. Lights, equipment, nurses rushing. And as Isabella was wheeled toward the operating room, she whispered something barely audible. "Please let my baby live." Thousands of miles away, Damien Blackwood raised a champagne glass. Paris glittered around him. Investors applauded his latest expansion deal. Clara Whitmore stood beside him, elegant and composed. "Congratulations," she said smoothly. Damien smiled. "Just the beginning." But as the applause faded, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. Hospital notification. He frowned. Clara noticed. "Work?" she asked casually. Damien hesitated, then locked the phone. Nothing important. The moment passed. Music resumed. Laughter returned. Clara leaned closer. "You made the right choice coming here," she murmured. Damien nodded slowly, yet somewhere in the back of his mind, a small uneasiness lingered, but he ignored it because power, success, and admiration surrounded him. And far away in a hospital operating room, his child was fighting to survive. The operating room lights were blinding. Isabella felt everything blur together. Voices, machines, movement. Dr. Grant leaned over her gently. "We're starting now." She nodded weakly, fear wrapped tightly around her chest. But through the haze, she focused on one thought. My baby. Moments later, the surgery began. Minutes stretched endlessly. Then suddenly, a sharp cry pierced the room. The sound froze everyone. A baby's cry. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. Is that mine?" Dr. Grant smiled faintly behind his mask. "Yes." Relief washed through her body, but the doctor's expression shifted again. "However," her heart jumped. "The baby is stable," he continued carefully. "But you lost a lot of blood." Darkness crept at the edges of Isabella's vision. She forced herself to stay awake. "Please, just tell me he's okay." Dr. Grant nodded. "He's okay." The words echoed as everything faded, and Isabella finally lost consciousness. Morning sunlight filtered through the hospital window. Noah Quinn sat beside Isabella's bed, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. The baby slept peacefully, alive, healthy. Isabella slowly opened her eyes, weak but awake. Her gaze moved to the baby in Noah's arms. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "My son," Noah smiled softly. "He's strong." She held the baby carefully, studying his tiny face. Then her expression changed. Something inside her had shifted. The pain of betrayal, the fear, the humiliation. All of it crystallized into one quiet realization. She whispered softly while staring at her child, "I won't wait for him anymore." Noah understood immediately. The woman lying in that hospital bed was not the same one Damien left behind. Something had changed overnight. And somewhere across the ocean, a billionaire still had no idea that the life he abandoned had just begun transforming into something far more powerful. "I thought the hardest night was over. I was wrong." Isabella Quinn woke slowly to the soft beeping of hospital monitors and the quiet breathing of her newborn son lying beside her. Morning light filled the room. Everything looked peaceful, but peace was temporary. She shifted carefully in the bed, pain still lingering in her body from surgery. Yet her eyes never left the tiny face wrapped in blankets. So small, so fragile. "He survived," she whispered softly. Across the room, Noah sat in a chair near the window, exhaustion written across his face. He hadn't slept. When he noticed Isabella awake, he stood immediately. "How are you feeling?" She managed a weak smile. "Alive." That was the truth, barely. But something else had changed inside her during the long night. Fear had turned into clarity. She looked down at her baby again. "Damien doesn't know yet, does he?" Noah shook his head slowly. "No." A quiet pause filled the room. Then Isabella asked the question that surprised even her. "Did he call?" Noah hesitated, then answered honestly, "No." The silence after that answer felt heavier than anything that had happened in the past week. Not anger, not shock, just confirmation. The billionaire father hadn't even checked. Isabella gently touched the baby's tiny hand. A strange calm settled over her chest. "I understand now," she whispered. Noah frowned slightly. "Understand what?" Her eyes moved toward the window. "Who I can rely on." Before we continue, if you've made it this far into the story, take a quick moment to subscribe to the channel. We share stories about resilience, betrayal, when and the moments people rise when life pushes them down. Now let's see what happens next. Isabella looked back down at her child. His small fingers curled around hers instinctively, and in that moment she made a quiet promise. "I'll protect you, no matter what it costs." 3 days later, Isabella left the hospital. Walking felt different, not just physically, emotionally. The city looked unfamiliar, even though nothing had changed. Noah carried the baby seat carefully while Isabella followed beside him, moving slowly but steadily. The hospital doors slid open behind them. Freedom, but also uncertainty. "You can stay at my place," Noah said as they reached the truck. Isabella paused before answering. "I appreciate it." He waited. "But I'm going back to the apartment." Noah stared at her. "Why?" She looked toward the skyline where Damien's luxury penthouse towered above the city. "Because that chapter isn't finished yet." Noah didn't like the answer. "That man abandoned you." "I know." "Then why go back?" Isabella opened the passenger door slowly and sat down. And then she said something unexpected. "Because leaving quietly would mean he gets to pretend nothing happened." Noah frowned. "You want a confrontation?" She shook her head. "No." Her voice was calm. "I want closure." The truck engine started, but as they drove away from the hospital, Isabella felt another shift deep inside her mind. Closure didn't always mean forgiveness. Sometimes it meant walking away stronger. The penthouse looked exactly the same. That was the strangest part. Luxury furniture, glass walls overlooking the city, everything untouched. But the energy inside the apartment felt different, cold. Isabella stepped inside carefully while Noah carried the baby to the living room. "You shouldn't stay here," he muttered. She didn't respond. Instead, she walked toward the kitchen, the same place where the $20 bill had once rested. Her fingers brushed the table surface. A memory flashed. $20. Bread, milk, coins. She opened the refrigerator, still empty. A bitter smile crossed her face. "This place was never really home," she murmured. Noah set the baby carrier on the couch. "So what's the plan?" Isabella turned toward him slowly. "For now?" She glanced at her sleeping child. "Survive." But Noah noticed something else. The look in her eyes had changed again. There was calculation there now. Strategy. "You're thinking about something," he said. She nodded. "Yes." "What?" Isabella walked toward the office room Damien rarely allowed her to enter. Then she opened the door. Inside were rows of computers and documents related to Damien's empire. She looked at the screens quietly. "I gave up my career for this company," she said softly. Noah crossed his arms. "So?" Her voice hardened. "I know how this industry works." And suddenly Noah understood. His sister wasn't just planning survival. She was planning a comeback. Across the ocean, Damien Blackwood sat in a private Paris lounge surrounded by investors. Contracts covered the glass table. Millions of dollars changing hands. Clara Whitmore watched him with quiet satisfaction. "You've impressed everyone," she said smoothly. Damien leaned back in his chair. "Good." But something interrupted the moment. His phone vibrated again. Another hospital notification. This time longer. He frowned slightly. Clara noticed. "Still work issues?" she asked. Damien unlocked the phone briefly. The message preview showed a word that caught his eye. "Delivery." He blinked. "Strange," he muttered. Clara leaned forward subtly. "What is it?" He shook his head dismissively. "Probably an automated message." And just like that, he locked the phone again. The notification disappeared. Clara smiled faintly. "Focus," she said. Damien nodded. "Of course." The contracts were signed moments later. Millions secured, but thousands of miles away. The child he ignored had already been born. Back in the city, night settled over the penthouse. The baby cried softly. Isabella lifted him gently, rocking him near the window overlooking the skyline. "You're hungry again," she whispered. Motherhood had arrived suddenly, but strangely it felt natural. Noah walked into the room carrying groceries. "Stock the fridge," he said. She smiled gratefully. "Thank you." He placed the bags on the counter and studied her carefully. "You look different." Isabella raised an eyebrow. "Tired?" "No." He shook his head. "Focused." She didn't deny it. Instead, she sat at the dining table with her laptop open. "What are you working on?" Noah asked. She turned the screen toward him. "A business proposal." His eyes widened. "This is tech infrastructure." Isabella nodded. "I used to design systems like this before I quit my job." "You quit because Damien asked you to." "I know." Silence lingered. Then Noah leaned closer. "This plan could actually work." Her fingers moved across the keyboard again. That's the idea. But there was a twist. Noah noticed the company name typed at the top of the proposal. Quinn Dynamics, not Blackwood Industries. His eyebrows lifted. You're starting your own company? Isabella smiled faintly. Yes. And somewhere in Europe, Damien still believed she was helpless. Weeks passed, slowly, quietly, but things began to change. Isabella worked during the baby's naps, late nights, early mornings. Her knowledge of the industry returned faster than she expected. Noah watched the transformation with growing respect. One evening, he walked into the living room and saw 3 screens open on her laptop. Emails, contracts, investor messages. You're moving fast, he said. She didn't look up. I have to. Why the rush? Isabella finally paused, then answered honestly. Because when Damien comes back, I don't want to be the woman he left behind. Noah leaned against the wall. And what woman do you want to be? She closed the laptop slowly. The one he underestimated. At that exact moment, an email notification appeared on her screen. New investor interest. She opened it quickly. Her eyes widened. Noah! What? She turned the screen toward him. A venture capital firm wanted to schedule a meeting. Serious money. His jaw dropped. This could launch the company. Isabella nodded slowly, but inside her mind, another realization formed. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was opportunity. 2 months later, Quinn Dynamics officially launched. The first office was small, just a rented floor inside a modest tech building, but the energy inside the space felt electric. Developers worked at desks, engineers tested software, and at the center of it all, Isabella Quinn stood reviewing data on a large screen. Noah walked beside her. You built this fast, he said. She smiled slightly. Necessity is powerful. A young employee approached nervously. Ms. Quinn, the investor call is ready. She nodded. Thank you. But before stepping into the meeting room, she paused near the window overlooking the busy city. 6 months ago, she had been standing in a hospital bed, wondering if her child would survive. Now she was running a growing tech startup. Life moved fast. Noah noticed the distant look in her eyes. Sure you okay? She nodded. Yes. But then she whispered something quietly. I wonder if he even knows. Noah didn't need to ask who, and the truth was, Damien still had no idea. In Paris, Damien finally prepared to return home. The European tour had been wildly successful, billions in new deals, international recognition. Clara poured champagne into 2 glasses inside the hotel suite. You've conquered Europe, she said. Damien smirked. Just another milestone. She handed him a glass. So what happens when you go back home? He shrugged casually. Back to business. And Isabella? The question lingered. Damien waved dismissively. She'll be fine. Clara studied him quietly. You haven't spoken to her in weeks. He took a sip of champagne. She understands the pressure I'm under. But even as he said it, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his mind. Still, he ignored it. Because in his world, success justified everything. Across the room, the television quietly displayed international business news. Neither of them noticed the scrolling headline at the bottom. A new tech startup was gaining rapid attention. The name flashed briefly. Quinn Dynamics. Back home, Isabella held her son near the office window. Employees moved around the room. Phones rang. Computers hummed. The company was growing faster than expected. Her baby stirred in her arms. You're going to see something amazing one day, she whispered. Noah entered the office quickly. You need to see this. He handed her a tablet. She looked down. A financial news article filled the screen. Rising tech firm Quinn Dynamics signs multi-million-dollar investment deal. Her breath caught. The article was spreading across the industry. Her company, her name, recognition. For a moment, she simply stared at the screen. Then she laughed quietly. Not from joy, from irony. 6 months ago, she couldn't afford groceries. Now investors were competing to fund her company. Noah folded his arms proudly. Cooey, not bad for someone left with $20. Isabella smiled faintly, but then her gaze drifted toward the city skyline again. Somewhere out there, a man was flying back home, and soon he would finally learn the truth. The private jet touched down just after sunrise. Damien Blackwood stepped onto the runway with the confident stride of a man returning victorious. Deals secured, investors impressed, Europe conquered. For weeks, applause and admiration had surrounded him like armor. Now the city skyline of home stretched across the horizon. Familiar, predictable, waiting. Damien adjusted his coat and glanced at his phone as the car door opened beside the jet. Several missed notifications, business alerts, emails. But one message caught his attention, a headline link. He almost ignored it. Almost, but curiosity nudged him. He tapped the screen briefly. A business article loaded. His eyes skimmed the first lines. Emerging tech firm Quinn Dynamics signs major investment. He frowned. Quinn. The name felt familiar. But before he could read further, Clara's voice interrupted from behind. Ready? Damien locked the phone again. Yes. He stepped into the waiting car. Engines hummed as the vehicle pulled away from the airport. Outside the window, the city passed in fast-moving flashes. Billboards, glass towers, traffic lights. Damien leaned back against the leather seat, confident that life would resume exactly where he left it. But somewhere deeper in the city, the story he abandoned had already rewritten itself, and he had no idea yet. The penthouse felt strangely quiet. Damien stepped inside, expecting the usual stillness of luxury. Instead, something felt off immediately. No music, no lights, no movement. He walked slowly across the living room, his shoes echoing against the polished floor. Isabella? He called casually. No response. He frowned slightly. Maybe she was sleeping. He walked toward the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed softly. Everything looked clean, but empty. A strange detail caught his eye. A folded piece of paper sat on the counter. He picked it up. An electricity disconnection notice. Damien blinked. Why would this be here? He turned the paper over. More unpaid bills stacked beneath it. Confusion crept into his expression. He walked toward the bedroom. The closet door stood open. Half the clothing was gone. The baby room he had ordered months earlier stood untouched. Dust collected lightly on the crib. A strange chill ran through his chest. Something wasn't right. He pulled out his phone and dialed Isabella. The call rang once, twice, then voicemail. Damien stared at the silent room. For the first time since leaving Europe, unease replaced confidence. He whispered under his breath, "Where did she go?" Downstairs, the building concierge recognized Damien immediately. "Welcome back, Mr. Blackwood." Damien nodded distractedly. "Where's my wife?" The concierge hesitated slightly. "Mrs. Quinn?" Damien stiffened. "Yes." The man glanced briefly at his computer screen, then said something unexpected. "She moved out months ago." Damien blinked. "What?" The concierge continued carefully. "She left shortly after you traveled to Europe." A quiet pause filled the lobby. Damien's jaw tightened. "Did she say where she went?" The concierge shook his head. "No, sir." Then he added something casually. "But I think she's doing quite well." Damien frowned. "What does that mean?" The concierge smiled politely. "I saw her name in the news recently." A strange feeling crawled through Damien's mind. "What news?" The concierge shrugged lightly. "Something about a tech company." The words hit strangely. Tech company. Damien suddenly remembered the article he had started reading on the plane. Quinn Dynamics. His heart skipped once. Then he dismissed the idea instantly. Impossible. Isabella had abandoned her career years ago. She wouldn't suddenly build a company, right? Yet the uneasiness didn't fade. Damien walked back toward the elevator slowly, and for the first time, doubt followed him upstairs. Curiosity turned into urgency. Back inside the penthouse, Damien opened his laptop quickly. He typed 2 words into the search bar. Quinn Dynamics. The results loaded instantly. Dozens of articles appeared. Business headlines, investment announcements, industry analysis. His eyes moved quickly across the screen. Then he froze. One article featured a photograph. The image loaded slowly. And there she was, Isabella Quinn, standing confidently in front of a modern office building. Executives beside her, reporters surrounding her, and in her arms, a baby. Damien's breath caught. No. His eyes moved to the headline above the photo. Rising CEO, Isabella Quinn secures multi-million-dollar investment. CEO. His mind struggled to process the information. When the woman he left behind with $20 was now leading a tech company gaining national attention. His hands tightened on the laptop. The article continued. Quinn Dynamics has quickly emerged as one of the most promising tech startups in the sector. Damien leaned back slowly in his chair. Shock spread across his face. He whispered quietly, "When did this happen?" But the deeper question had already formed. How did he miss everything? Across the city, Isabella walked through the glass doors of Quinn Dynamics headquarters. Employees greeted her as she passed. "Morning, Ms. Quinn." "Morning." The office buzzed with activity. Investors, engineers, meetings. 6 months of relentless work had transformed the startup into a serious competitor. Noah walked beside her carrying a tablet. "3 meetings today," he said. She nodded. "Let's start with the investor call." But before they reached the conference room, Noah's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then raised an eyebrow. "What?" Isabella asked. He turned the phone toward her. Caller ID, Damien Blackwood. The name hung between them. Isabella stared at it calmly. For a moment, the room seemed quieter. "Are you going to answer?" Noah asked. She considered it, then shook her head. "Not today." He declined the call. The phone stopped ringing. Business continued. But somewhere across the city, a billionaire waited beside his phone, realizing something unsettling. The woman who once waited for his calls was no longer waiting. Damien didn't give up. 30 minutes later, he drove across the city. The address he found online led him to a tall glass building in the tech district. He stepped out of the car slowly. Above the entrance, a sleek silver logo reflected the sunlight. Quinn Dynamics. Employees moved in and out of the building confidently. Damien stared at the sign. It felt surreal. He walked toward the entrance. Inside, the reception area buzzed with quiet efficiency. A receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" Damien straightened his jacket. "I'm here to see Isabella Quinn." The receptionist typed quickly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." She checked the system. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood." Her fingers paused briefly on the keyboard. Recognition flashed in her eyes, but her expression remained professional. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood. Ms. Quinn is in meetings today." Damien frowned. "Tell her I'm here." The receptionist made a quick call. A moment later, she looked back up. "She says security will escort you upstairs." Damien nodded confidently. He expected gratitude, shock, maybe even relief. Instead, the elevator doors opened to a floor where Isabella Quinn was no longer the abandoned wife. She was the boss. The elevator doors slid open quietly. Damien stepped into a bright executive floor filled with glass offices and moving staff. At the far end of the hallway, Isabella stood speaking with 2 executives. She looked different, stronger, confident. Her posture alone commanded respect. In her arms, the baby rested peacefully. For a moment, Damien simply stared. Then he walked forward. "Isabella." The name echoed softly through the hallway. She turned slowly. Their eyes met. Time seemed to pause. Damien searched her face for anger, for sadness, for anything familiar. But what he found instead was calm distance. "You came back," she said evenly. He nodded once. "I needed to see you." His eyes moved briefly to the baby. "Is that?" "Yes," she replied. A quiet pause followed. Employees watched discreetly from their desks. Damien took another step forward. "I didn't know." Isabella studied him carefully, then said something simple. "You didn't ask." The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Silence filled the corridor, and Damien suddenly realized something. He had walked into her world now, not the other way around. Damien tried to recover his composure. "I think we should talk privately," he said. Isabella glanced toward the conference room, then shook her head. "There's nothing private left." Her voice remained calm, but every word carried weight. Damien gestured toward the baby again. "You had our child without telling me." Isabella blinked once, then replied quietly, "You were busy." The memory flashed across her mind. Investor dinners, champagne, inconvenient timing. She stepped closer so he could see the baby's face clearly. "This is your son." Damien looked down. The child slept peacefully. For a moment, something human softened in his expression, But when he looked back up, Isabella's eyes had already hardened again. "The $20 you left me with," she said slowly. Employees nearby stopped pretending not to listen. "That was the last thing I ever needed from you." The hallway fell silent. Damien's throat tightened. "I can fix this." Isabella shook her head. "No." Her answer was immediate and final. Security arrived moments later. Not aggressively, just professionally. One guard stepped beside Damien politely. "Sir, we need to escort you out." Damien looked stunned. Isabella, but she had already turned away. Her attention shifted back to the executives waiting beside her. Business resumed. Meetings continued. The world moved forward. Damien stood frozen for a moment before finally walking toward the elevator. The doors closed slowly. As the elevator descended, realization settled heavily across his face. He had expected a desperate wife. Instead, he met a woman who no longer needed him. Outside the building, Damien stepped onto the sidewalk and looked back up at the towering glass headquarters. Employees moved behind the windows, a company growing stronger by the day, a life he abandoned. And for the first time in years, the billionaire gasped, not from shock, from regret. High above, Isabella stood by the window, holding her son. The city stretched endlessly before her. Once, she had whispered to herself in fear. Now her thoughts were steady. "I survived, we survived." And far below, the man who underestimated her finally understood what he had lost. Take a moment to subscribe, share the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this remind us that strength often rises from the moments we are left behind. Stay connected, because the next story might surprise you even more.